Very exciting. Very exciting. And I think one of the biggest winners in all of this was Kyrie. Kyrie was in Boston, basically his own team. Decides, I'm going to leave Boston, hoping he can get a better situation. Grew up rooting for the Nets. It talked about his dad. Him and his dad have a very close relationship. I'm sure his dad had some influence on it. But I just believe you get to a certain point in your career, if you can choose where you want to go to work and you can pick where you want to go to work. He likes the East Coast. He's from here. He's from Jersey. So I would have been shocked if he wouldn't have chose one of the New York teams. But in choosing the Nets were able to win out, and not just because that's where he wanted to go, but he was able to convince Kevin Durant that he can always have a sidekick over the length of his career, a sidekick in Kevin Durant that make Brooklyn one of the destinations. If you're going to watch an NBA game, and I've been very fortunate, we've been in the city the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of Nets basketball games. They play an exciting brand of basketball. You got to take your hat off to Sean Marks, their general managers. In those 3 years there, when they hired him, they were the laughingstock. He has done tremendous things with a lack of draft resources. He's been able to find some players, develop some other players, deciding on the coach in Atkinson. That was a tremendous hire. He teaches a good brand of basketball. They have a great environment, work environment. Kustak's on the show. She always talks about how they treat the players, the camaraderie amongst the players. So this was the big upset in the Knicks not getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, convincing him to come to Brooklyn with him. And they let him off the hook easy so that with them taking less money, they could build a team around them really smart by the two of them.
Obvious devastation for the team in the other borough of New York City, Manhattan, the New York Knicks. And I know we're going to focus more on the Knicks angle later, but you can't talk about this today without mentioning that for a year on this show and other shows, we have talked about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving teaming up in New York City. And we got all that right. But I, as of 2 hours before the open of free agency, I was still, maybe I was the only one, convinced at the very least, even if Kyrie goes to Brooklyn, Durant's still going to go to New York. Durant had set up his businesses here in New York. The plan was the Knicks. And something went astray with that. And now Brooklyn, all of a sudden, after giving away the franchise in the KG Pierce trade, 6 years later, has the building blocks of, once Kevin Durant gets back healthy, a team that could dominate and all of a sudden very strong Eastern Conference for years to come.
And, Nick, you weren't wrong by yourself. There was a lot of, even the Knicks. I mean, I talked to the Knicks about an hour before free agency broke, and they were like, we're out of it. And
they had just found out.
Yes. And it was shocking, you know, to me and to them that they were going to be out of it. They were actually in Los Angeles when free agency opened. So even if Kevin Durant was going to have, face-to-face meetings, they weren't even going to be here to be able to do that.
The one thing we don't know, though, when you say something went astray with KD is whether that was on KD's side or on the Knicks side, which you're hearing stories from both sides, but that is something we do still have to work on.
Right, and I know we're going to talk about the Knicks. Did they or did they not offer him the max deal? But the reality is Brooklyn saw this possibility. They saw it when they moved Alan Crabb's contract, when after finally Sean Marks pulling them out of draft pick hell, put them right back in it by trading away future picks to open up cap space. Cap space, all this cap space. The cap space the Lakers have but haven't been able to use yet. The Clippers have but haven't been able to use yet. The Knicks have but haven't been able to really use yet. They opened up believing this could happen. And this is instructive for anyone running a basketball team in a major market in this country. You know what's overrated? Young players, assets, and draft picks. You know what's underrated? Location, infrastructure, and money. Because Kyrie and KD wanted to play together. This is the era of super friends. LeBron got it kicked off a decade ago. We're now buttoning it up in 2019 with two friends saying, we want to play together. We want to play together in a cool city. And we want to do it where we both can get, even if we take a slight haircut, no pun intended, on the money, we're going to make as much money as possible. And so they did all of that in Brooklyn, and credit to the Nets, because they gave them a viable option that wasn't the Jim Dolan-run New York Knicks.
All right, so on paper, CC, this is a great team with a ton of upside and two superstars, 2.5, if you will, well-coached, well-managed, all of it. But these are two guys with odd personalities coming together to play. We have to question maybe leadership skills there. And also, KD's not going to be playing next series, most likely, at least not in the regular season, going to be rehabbing from that Achilles injury. So I ask you two questions. One, what is the ceiling for next year? And then what is the overall ceiling for this Nets team?
Well, let's look at where they were before they acquired these two players. You talked about the inner structure. You talked about the coaching. You talked about the things that they already have. Who was the leader of their team last year? Don't necessarily have just one leader. It's a team of a bunch of young, hungry players that are trying to, the coaching staff has them going in the right direction. You can't even say D'Angelo Russell was the leader of that team. So they did it by committee. And so now when you inherit Kyrie and KD in free agency, we know who the leaders are. It's 13. It's 13, and collectively, I believe they'll put their thumbprint on it. Now, are there still some question marks as far as from a forward standpoint? You know, are their forwards good enough? I believe they got enough shooting to be able to space the court, and Kyrie has proven, and KD has proven, and I believe that his game will be back very similar to the game. It won't be a 70% Kevin Durant. I believe it will be in the 95 percentile as far as the way he scores. They can score the basketball against anyone. So when they both get on the court and they both get healthy, not next year, 19-20, but 20 and 21, they will be a title contender.
So, correct. If the ceiling for next year is the Eastern Conference Finals, if all goes perfectly, unless Durant has a 6 to 9 month recovery instead of 9 to 12 months. If Durant somehow comes back next season, then the ceiling is go to the NBA Finals, see what happens. But that's not realistic, and I wouldn't imagine KD, after suffering the injury he suffered, is going to rush himself back at the very beginning of a 4-year contract, and I don't think the Nets would want him to do that. So it is about 20-21 and then 21-22, and that is where there is an enormous responsibility on Kyrie Irving this season. Not about wins and losses. Yes, there is that. But it is about Kyrie Irving with Karis LeVert, with Spencer Dinwiddie, with Joe Harris, with Taurean Prince, to be, because as you talk about all the time, it's tough to be a leader when you're not playing. It's tough to be a leader when you are rehabbing. Kyrie is going to be the de facto leader of this team. And it can't be that Kevin Durant, when he comes back, is coming back into a even slightly toxic environment. It has to be the same good feelings they had this year, just with better success and more talent. If that happens, then a year from now, the Nets will go into next season, the season after this one, as the favorites in the Eastern Conference without seeing them play a game together, because KD is that good. But that takes Kyrie's maturation. That takes Kyrie's health. That takes Kyrie learning from the bad experiences in Boston and not repeating those mistakes.
I think Kevin Durant took a leadership role in even going to Brooklyn with the upset not going to the Knicks. So I do believe that, I know this, in a locker room, it's hard to lead when you're hurt. But when you're coming in as a free agent and you're changing the NBA structure, that leadership starts immediately. That's why they go out and get the center.
Oh, DeAndre Jordan.
And with Kevin Durant taking a little bit less, that shows leadership that I'm trying to build. I'm sure this young locker room, they have never played with a player like Kevin Durant. So I just believe it's not Kyrie lead until KD. No, this is KD's franchise. KD is going to be leading from the time he made the decision to join the Nets.
And we should mention, Kyrie missed 56 games over the last 2 seasons in Boston. It's, like you said, very hard to lead. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.